Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Diabetes Hits Different Dialogue with ADA. I am Crystal Woodward, Director of the ADA's Safe at School initiative. Joining me today is Dr. Henry Rodriguez, Clinical Director of the University of South Florida's Diabetes and Endocrinology Center and co-chair of ADA's Safe at School Working Group. And also joining us is Karen Harriman, family nurse practitioner and a certified diabetes care and education specialist and co-chair of ADA's Safe at School Working Group. Today's ADA dialogue will focus upon Safe at School and, in particular, changes to diabetes management in the school setting over the last decade or so. And we know there have been a lot of changes. So welcome, Henry and Karen, and thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise and time. So I'm going to start off, just get the conversation going by asking, how is managing diabetes at school today different from managing diabetes at school 10 years ago? Give us your perspective on that, and let's get this dialogue going.
Well,
Karen, you want to start?
How about if I start on this one? I have just recently retired, so it's a really good question about just reflecting in terms of what's happened to diabetes care over all these years. So 10 years, I was even thinking beyond that at first about how we urine tested and had these meters that took forever and needed big drops of blood. But if I look at the last 10 years, you look at everything from our meters getting more accurate, drops of blood being smaller. You look at our insulin devices from only having syringes to insulin pens, and now to pumps, technology integrated with our CGM systems. It's just really exciting to see the changes that have gone on, which has made things a lot easier in the school setting.
I guess I'd have to concur. The technology has really been a big piece that has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And I think as really a team, the school staff, the diabetes care providers, the families, managing diabetes in school has really dramatically changed, because we're now able to, particularly with regards to continuous glucose monitors, predict and really anticipate that a blood sugar is changing. And so no longer do we have to address a child that's low. It's more the conversation, well, Sally's number is drifting down there. Let's intervene before it gets to be a major problem. And so I think it's less traumatic, if I want to use that term, for the student. All of a sudden there's all this commotion because it's an emergency, to where, this is something that can be really managed as opposed to kind of day to day versus it being an emergency situation. And as Karen mentioned, the continuous glucose monitors, the insulin pumps, all of those things have allowed us to honestly better control students' blood sugars. So there should be less in the way of major issues occurring at school.
I'm going to add another perspective on that as the parent of a now grown daughter with type 1 diabetes, and having a child who started school back in 1994. You know what else has changed? Social media. With just the addition of social media and being able to share information, and parents being able to get together online and share ideas and brainstorm problems, and not just with the parents, but also with the medical community and the rest of the diabetes community. I think that's changed the way we do things in school tremendously. And we'll talk about resources and just, the wealth of comprehensive resources out there these days for schools, for parents, for providers, so that, we can all collaborate as best as possible to make sure the needs of the kids are met, and to make sure we're all prepared and to work together to make sure we're using that technology to benefit the child as much as possible. So social media has made a big difference, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So Were there times in the past when students were discouraged from participating in school sports and field trips and extracurricular activities? And if so, why do you think that was? And what's changed about that?
Karen.
How about if I go first, Henry, and you do a beautiful job of complimenting.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. Absolutely. It has come a long ways. I just see so much of children not being able to go on field trips, let's say, without, absolutely with their parents there. Discouraged with getting involved with sports, extracurricular activities because of not having staff at school to be able to handle, the students' diabetes. So it's just really, it's just exciting to see the changes that have occurred to make that possible.
I mean, we've done an annual sports camp here for kids with diabetes. And the novel thing about it is all the coaches have type 1 diabetes, and they've either played professional, semi-professional, or college sports. And hearing their recollection of what it was like for them, to the point where, somebody who is a very talented athlete hears after the fact that a recruiter questioned whether they would be an attractive recruit because they have type 1 diabetes. And so I think there's been a greater awareness, in part because of the advocacy efforts of the American Diabetes Association and others, to really highlight the fact that individuals with type 1 diabetes who manage their diabetes well really excel in all areas of life. And so, having those mentors, having that awareness, I think makes all of the difference. And being able to say to a coach that is a little hesitant, hey, listen, Sam Fold, who, is a professional baseball player, he's done X, Y, and Z, or, back then it was Gary Owens, right? Was it Owens? Gold medalist in swimming.
Gary Hall.
The Hall, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, names. Yeah. But being able to really remind folks that, it doesn't need to be a barrier. It's something that's managed and it really offers the opportunity for these students to participate in really all activities around school.
I would just add to that by saying there are legal protections for children with diabetes, children with disabilities, and diabetes is a disability. And depending on the type of school, whether it's public, private, religious, schools are required to provide trained personnel to go on field trips. We had a comment that in the comment box that a parent is required to go on a field trip with her 15-year-old, or else the 15-year-old can't go along on the field trip. So just know that there are federal laws that require schools to provide trained personnel, whether it's a school nurse, whether it's a teacher who has been trained, whether it's a guidance counselor, but schools legally are required to provide trained personnel to accompany the child on the field trip. And, some of the school districts across the country, I think it's really smart, especially for the kids who self-manage. A lot of school districts have trained their bus drivers in the recognition and treatment of hypoglycemia. So that might be something that parents should discuss with their school nurses and school administrators. Would that be possible in their school district? And of course, with the little guys and the newly diagnosed, there certainly needs to be someone going along on that field trip who can recognize and treat the lows and help with insulin.
Absolutely.
But things have changed a lot in that regard too. And now we have, we also have 36 states that allow trained non-clinical staff to give insulin. And, that makes a big difference in terms of providing care to kids outside of the school day at school-sponsored events.
And Crystal, I know you're probably going to get to this with regards to the recent New York City legislation, but there's a comment with regards to a small private school that perhaps may not be subject to the federal laws because they may not get federal dollars. But I think this is an area where hopefully you've got individuals at that school who are interested, willing, committed to helping the student with diabetes, and there are lots and lots of resources that are available to them through the Safe at School initiative.
Absolutely. And I will say that I rarely talk with a person these days who doesn't have a family member or close friend for diabetes. So almost everyone knows somebody else with diabetes, right? And that makes the teachers and other school personnel familiar with diabetes and more willing, I think, to step up and to offer to provide care to that child. So even though religious schools who do not receive federal funding may not have the same legal obligations, there is a way, I think, to reasonably identify and recruit folks who can be trained to care for that child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've kind of alluded to this, but I'm just going to still ask the question. How has ever-evolving technology enhanced the ability of students with diabetes to miss less classroom time? And how has it enabled them to more fully participate in all school-sponsored activities?
So I think we discussed this a lot with where we've been and come as far as technology goes. So again, dovetailing with what Henry shared about the trending data with the blood glucose monitoring, has just been able to get students out of the clinic sooner, knowing that everything is heading up and that they're safe. And they used to spend a lot of time in the clinics and missing their education as well as other activities. So I truly feel like anything is possible with these students now with the support of the schools. Let me just start there. So I'm going to let you guys jump in.
Yeah, I think the diabetes medical management plan is a starting point, right? It's that plan that the healthcare provider, in concert with the family, develops this medical management plan that adequately accommodates the child with diabetes in terms of the medical management, what to do when they're high, when they're low, how to prevent highs and lows. To your point, Karen, looking at that trending data, I think folks initially were concerned that, for instance, continuous glucose monitor was just way too much information. But I think when they're educated, when they're trained as to, hey, listen, what you're looking at is for a trend here, and again, it allows folks to intervene in a situation where it's not an emergency, where they're not having to, gosh, we need to get the nurse in here because the child's low, or they can't participate in sports or an after school activity because they're low. Being able to really say, well, maybe you need an extra snack, or we need to adjust insulin delivery, that kind of thing. It's really, really important. And so, yeah, we definitely want, the ideal here is, in some future iteration of technology and therapies and so forth, that, the student with diabetes really doesn't require any accommodations. But right now, there are accommodations, utilizing that medical management plan, meeting with school, officials, school nurse and so forth, and, developing a plan that's going to address that child's educational needs, accommodating those medical requirements. It should be a fairly straightforward process, but again, education is central to that.
And along those lines of education, training is definitely a common thread throughout this conversation. So it's what would be helpful, I think, to the school nurse, and is for parents to work with providers to identify training opportunities for school nurses and for non-clinical staff on pumps and CGMs, because I think it can be overwhelming, a little intimidating at first, using all of the new technology. But with a little training and a little patience, I think school nurses and staff will come to realize that the devices really enable the care to be easier and more straightforward, and takes the guessing,
Mm-hmm.
out of it. Because with the CGM, you know what the child's blood glucose levels are at any given time. So I think that's a great enhancement to the school nurse's ability to provide quality and appropriate care to that child.
And not just the level at that time, but as we've discussed, where it's headed.
Trends, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted, before you start your next question, Crystal, there was a great comment, and it's a very true one when we looked at where we've been with diabetes in the past and where we are today, is a big change has been the increased incidence of type 2 in our schools.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mention that at the beginning, but I truly, that's a big change of what we're seeing in schools.
Yeah, and that raises a whole number of different issues. I mean, I think every student with diabetes, there's the risk and our concern that they're going to be somehow ostracized or made to feel, particularly when you get into adolescent ages, right? So where, the peer group is super, super important. For the child with type 2 diabetes, a lot of the management has to do with encouraging, good dietary habits and exercise and so forth. And again, having a plan in place where those needs are identified in addition to medication that they might be on, eventually on a continuous glucose monitor even, but, addressing those needs as you would for someone with type 1 diabetes. These are individualized plans that, if in place, will really facilitate that students participating in all of the school activities.
With confidence.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So how has the ADA's Safe at School campaign helped to support diabetes management at school, in terms of resources and technology and changes in laws and policy? How's the campaign, do you think, has helped in this last decade and beyond?
Decade, I would just say even this past year with what we've gotten accomplished at the Safe at School program. But I'm just going to encourage everybody to please go to the American Diabetes Association and look at the Safe at School, the resources there, because we all are so excited of what is there to help support. And Crystal, maybe I'll just go ahead and go over some of those, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So one of our biggest accomplishments was to update the diabetes medical management plan. It had really has gotten consolidated, and it's an exciting piece of document where we're going to encourage families to also get involved with that. And we'll talk more about that later. But we've also updated the Helping the Student with Diabetes Succeed, a guide for school personnel, which has just gotten updated and hot off the press and on the website, as well as our training task modules to help school nurses with all the different tasks that are involved with taking care of our students. I was on the website again this morning, Crystal, to also see that we have the diabetes technology videos. There's a school nurses pump checklist. We also have the new recommendations for continuous glucose monitors in the school setting, which just got updated to help give some guidelines with that. There are tips for school nurses, questions for school officials, medical and scientific resources. And then I also oftentimes have gone over the years and encouraged our families to look at the school rights as a parent to fully understand those laws. And there's some wonderful resources on that too on the website. So I will stop there.
And Karen, you make my job so much easier. I would just echo that sentiment and again, remind our audience that, we're co-chairs of the ADA Safe at School Working Group. And we really have the privilege of working with tremendous number of volunteers that assist in developing these materials. And, I think back over the past year or even more, unfortunately, with regards to COVID, even, providing resources and making individuals aware of potential risks of COVID for individuals with diabetes versus not, and appropriate safeguards and preparation and so forth. So, the association has really put a lot of effort, a lot of investment into developing these materials and keeping them current, so that really individuals at the ground level, right, the school staff and so forth, have those resources available to them. And as Karen mentioned, you mentioned, again, coming back to the technology piece, I think for school nurses that maybe haven't been focused on diabetes for a long, long time, those technologies can seem very, very intimidating. We've developed these materials so that it really provides an introduction with additional reference material, so that the school personnel can really do that prep work. So then when they sit down with the parents or the family of that student, feel that they've got some firm footing in terms of what they're likely to encounter with that student.
Very good. Very good. I will just add that in the last couple of decades, ADA has led the effort to pass what we call safe at school legislation in many states across the country. And right now we have state statutes, regulations, and other policies that allow the school nurse to delegate or allow the school administrator to identify and recruit and train lay school staff to provide all aspects of diabetes care, insulin administration, glucagon administration, allow kids who are capable of doing so to self-manage. So I think with the laws that have transpired in the last couple of decades, the schools have an enhanced ability, a greater ability and capability, more bandwidth to provide care to these kids, because we know that even the full-time school nurse cannot be in all places at all times. So it's important to have that trained lay staff, and ADA has led the charge in many of the states to make sure that that is a legal option for schools. So I think that has greatly enhanced the ability of schools to provide appropriate and timely care to kids with diabetes, and not just during the school day, but as we mentioned earlier, during field trips, sporting activities, and other extracurricular activities. I mean, school dances, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's happened in the last couple of, we're talking about last decade, but the last couple of decades, we're so much further along now than we were, back in 2000, and many more good things to come.
And Crystal, what occurs to me is, I think it's really important for individuals affected by diabetes, family members, parents of students, and so forth, to make sure that they advocate for the appropriate support. One thing is legislation, and that is absolutely paramount in terms of importance. But without investment, as we saw in the New York City, capital and focus and personnel to make sure that there are adequate resources to assist students with diabetes. The legislation, as I said, is important, but it's a first piece, quite honestly.
Yeah, and ADA recommends that every student with diabetes have a 504 plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even if you think you don't need one, and even if everything is going well at school, that's the time to put that 504 plan in place when everything's going well. Don't wait for something to happen. Don't wait for a problem to arise. Be proactive rather than reactive, and put that 504 plan in place today. And there's more information on our website about developing the 504 plan and what should go into the 504 plan.
And Crystal, just to remind folks, the 504 plan is really taking that diabetes medical management plan and saying, okay, well, how can we accommodate that student's academic curriculum, programming, and so forth to ensure that those medical needs are met without disrupting their academics too much.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and reality is that many times schools are not going to encourage families to do the 504 plans. So please don't let that be the barrier to having that to having that implemented.
Yeah. Usually it's a matter of education. Sometimes schools passively discourage it. And I mean, my experience has been that once schools have an understanding and comfort level with diabetes, and once they have an understanding of their legal obligations under federal and state law, it helps them to see how having a written accommodations plan, such as a 504 plan, benefits everyone.
And there's a comment in there from someone regarding a very small school, I guess in Oklahoma. If that school gets federal funding, they have to make accommodations, appropriate accommodations for students with diabetes.
Yes.
Class of 5, that's pretty small.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes. And even if it's a private school,
Wow.
that school still has obligations to meet the needs of kids with disabilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So just know that. And even better, go on ADA's website and you can learn all about the relevant federal and state laws that impact your child while at school. Yeah. So how might parents better prepare to send their kids to school? And what about that has changed from 10 years ago?
All right, I'll do the first in this one again too. I think about 10 years ago, and parents pretty much when a child was newly diagnosed were at school every day until the school was comfortable in taking care of their child. I saw that time and time again, and I think over the years, schools have gotten much more comfortable. There have been the resources to help with training, the legal part of it. So I think that part has gotten much, much better as far as parents having confidence of sending their children to school on that respect. I also feel that how best to send, this is back with that whole triad of communication between the families, the healthcare providers, as well as the school system. From the very beginning, making that communication fluid, receptive, and we're all in this to support the student with diabetes. So I find that has come a long ways too, as far as everybody working together in that respect.
Yeah, Karen, I guess I would say amen to that. The communication is critically important. If you think about it, at the end of the day, as parents, one of your major functions is advocating for your child. It's no different for the student with diabetes at school. And so I think as far as preparing, making sure that, the family, the parent themselves feels confident as much as possible, getting the knowledge that they need from the healthcare providers, and then really going into the school, as Karen said, with the mindset that we're all partnering in making sure that child with diabetes, the student with diabetes, is able to safely participate in all the school activities and availing themselves of resources, from the ADA, getting that 504 plan in place. It really, on the one hand, it's a fine line. You don't want the parent, at least I always caution parents not to go in, with an attorney in tow, right? It shouldn't be an adversarial relationship. It's the parent trying to assist the school to provide for that student with diabetes and enlisting the assistance of other individuals and resources from the ADA in order to accomplish that.
Yes, that's definitely, that's a great plan. And I think, especially if your child's school does not already have a child with diabetes enrolled or hasn't had a child with diabetes enrolled before, they're going to need some help in identifying training resources. So I think that's where parents really come in too, and it could be a great assistance in helping the school nurse to identify, a diabetes educator to come out and get that training jump started. So, be a resource. Parents should be a resource for their school nurse and advocate for their school nurses, and their children, of course. But be your school nurse's advocate for resources and training.
And the school staff and the school nurse in turn,
Mhm.
you think about the number of hours that students spend at school, and they're spending it at school with their diabetes. And so the individuals that have eyes on them at school can really identify issues that perhaps are only an issue at school, and then informing the parents and in turn the healthcare team, so that if there are issues, as I said, that arise at school, that we can negotiate the best manner to manage them.
So ADA has recently achieved a big victory through a settlement of litigation against New York City Public Schools. And as part of the settlement, the school district is required to train nurses, bus drivers, and non-clinical staff and others. Can you just speak a little bit about the importance of training to the provision of diabetes care to students at school? And why is training so important? And why are ADA's training resources so important?
Oh my goodness. It would be without those resources, or the beginning of that student newly diagnosed, let's say, I don't know, as a parent, if I could ever, would have the confidence in sending my child. But I think it has just streamlined the process, given the schools the confidence of having those resources available. That has just been an incredible gift to everybody.
But when you say ideally, school nurses should certainly be up to date with their diabetes education and training, including device technology, and probably all school staff members who interface or who are responsible for students with diabetes should have some basic information about diabetes.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, and what does hypoglycemia look like? What do I do if I see that my student has gone low? And then, that third level of training that we talk about in the school guide and in our position statement, of training that small group of lay staff to provide all aspects of diabetes care, I think is absolutely critical to a student being able to access all activities. And to achieve academic success and normal, growth and development.
And we talked about it in terms of, participation in sports. It's dispelling the myths, the really inaccurate information with regards to individuals with diabetes. Students with diabetes, again, they should be managed just as any other child. I think just providing that information, educating the school staff, so there isn't this apprehension and anxiety about, oh my gosh, now I have a student with diabetes, I have to treat them with kid gloves, or just having that confidence to really support that child. And I like to say, with diabetes, there shouldn't be any emergencies, there shouldn't be any surprises. And this is where the 504 plan, the Diabetes Medical Management Plan, having the plan in place so that when something, goes off script, a pump stops working or what have you, it isn't, oh my gosh, we need to call 911. Believe me, we've gotten that. It's, well, yeah, okay, well, we have a pump now, we're going to move to injections. It's we've got a plan in place. It's all part of the process. It was mentioned earlier in the comments, ADA camp. Diabetes camp. We're talking about instilling confidence among parents and caretakers at school. A critical piece of that is also instilling confidence in the student with diabetes. And so, I'm a big advocate for a camp, and it's an opportunity for these kids to be in an environment where they're not the only one, or they're singled out, and they've got that sense of community and kinship, so to speak.
The other nice thing, though, with having all of those resources easily accessible, Crystal, is the fact that schools have these ebbs and flows of students with diabetes, because there might be years that they don't have a student depending on the school. And then all of a sudden somebody, comes and they need to integrate this child with diabetes right away. So it's nice to have those right at your fingertips to be able to have that training accessible.
And one other thing, I guess I would mention, and Karen, you had mentioned it, in terms of the resources that are available.
Yes.
A school nurse or even, another staff member, an alarm goes off, as my phone just did, on a device. What do you do about that? Well, there are sheets there that specifically provide that simple information regarding, what you do with that device. And it's device specific because, there are quite a number of them out there. That's a good thing. But having the knowledge and the resources available to deal with an alarm or an alert is really, really important.
Education and training are the keys. Keys
And
to the
communication.
kingdom. Yes, yes. So how crucial is collaboration of diabetes care at school, and who are the collaborators and what roles do they play?
Oh my goodness, we've got lots and lots of collaborators when you look at a life of a student with diabetes. And I think it made me reappreciate when we were going through that guide, Crystal, of looking at all of the job descriptions of everybody from the administrator to the bus driver to the PE, the coach, the students, the people in the food service. I mean, there's so many people in terms of the impact on these children. But I think, again, we're back on the collaboration most important between our three big groups, between the families, the healthcare providers, as well as the school systems, of just having open communication and realistic expectations too, in terms of what everybody can do. And then starting back with the DMMP, now we're just really encouraging parents to be a more active part in filling the first section of that out to give input in terms of what they feel their child, can best be supported in school. So that collaboration is huge, and any way that we can facilitate it, the better off we'll be.
Yeah. And again, just echoing communication and collaboration, it just can't happen without that. And it's not just acquiring that initial knowledge when that child is diagnosed, it's revisiting, whether that child has matured and has taken on more responsibility for certain aspects of their diabetes care, really supporting that independence and with providing some supervision. But, it really is, to use the adage, it takes a village. It really is the situation that we're all hoping exists in the school is that you've got everybody who feels confident in supporting that child, kind of stepping back and allowing them to be a student. I think that's critically important to their development.
So just to kind of wrap this up, in your own words, how would you say diabetes is different for children today?
Oh my goodness. I would definitely have to jump on looking at our diabetes management tools. The technology is just the largest part in terms of how diabetes management has changed over the years. That would be the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think, and Karen, if I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. Thanks for taking the first stab at all of these questions. But we mentioned social media, so I think diabetes in childhood is far less of a stigma than it used to be. I think there's a greater awareness. There's a greater, honestly, support. If you look at, it used to be, well, if you had a core number of families that happen to meet at an ADA event or a JERF event, gosh, but now they go on social media and there are some things to watch out for in social media, but I think it's allowed this sense of community to really develop for individuals that really care for children and students with diabetes and to feel supported. I think that's been a major change as well.
I was just going to say, with all the tools, the new insulins, the device technology, the resources, all of the strengthening of federal and state laws, and just coming from the parent perspective, I just feel that all of these benefits put together have given our children more confidence that they can be healthy and they can be safe and they can do anything.
Exactly. Yes.
So, I've watched my own daughter who was diagnosed 31 years ago. She's 32 now. And all of these new developments have changed her life and have just enabled her to live her life and live a life just like her friends. So, and I know she'll continue to do so along with all the other children with diabetes who have all of these same support systems.
Yeah.
So, well, Henry and Karen, thanks so much for joining us today and again sharing your time and expertise. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today and who is also viewing this later. We hope today's ADA dialogue has been helpful to everyone. If you need more information, please go to our website at diabetes.org/safeatschool. And also, if you're looking for some more specific information or your child is experiencing a diabetes management challenge at school, you can give us a call at 1-800-DIABETES or email askada@diabetes.org. And one of our legal advocates will be in touch with you via email to provide some additional information and guidance. But thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you, Crystal.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Be well.
Bye-bye.